The marble floor of First National Trust gleamed like ice under crystal chandeliers, reflecting the navy blazer of 17-year-old Marcus Washington as he approached the VIP teller window. His hands trembled slightly, clutching the $50,000 withdrawal slip for his MIT scholarship. Officer Derek Hayes, 45 and weathered by decades of patrol work, snapped the cold metal handcuffs around the boy's wrists. "You're just a criminal," Hayes growled. "Think you're fooling anyone?" Customers raised their phones, recording. Behind bulletproof glass, teller Emily Patterson cowered. Marcus whispered, "I have documents." Hayes shoved him onto the cold marble. "Shut up." His badge glinted under the lights. Marcus's phone skittered across the floor, its cracked screen displaying Dad, AG office. The Rolex on the wall read 11:47 a.m. Emily Patterson had watched Marcus enter through the bank's revolving doors with the practiced eye of someone who'd been trained to spot trouble, though the training never explicitly said to watch for young black men in nice clothes. Her 28 years had been spent in suburban Connecticut, where the only black people she knew were the ones she saw on television or the occasional professional who wandered into her previous bank branch. She examined him from head to toe, cataloging every detail. The way his blazer sat on his shoulders, too nice for someone his age, she thought. The careful way he walked, suspicious, like he was hiding something. The folder in his hands, probably fake documents. Her finger hovering over the silent alarm button before he'd even reached her window, a response so automatic, she wouldn't be able to explain it later when investigators asked. The way Marcus walked. Confident but not too confident. Careful but not suspicious. Set off alarms in her mind that had nothing to do with bank protocol and everything to do with assumptions she'd never admit out loud, even to herself. These assumptions had been built over years of subtle messaging. The way her mother clutched her purse when black teenagers walked by. The way her father changed the channel when protests came on the news. The way her training manager had once said, "You'll develop an instinct for trouble," while showing security footage that exclusively featured people of color. When Marcus placed his withdrawal slip on the marble counter, Emily's eyes widened at the amount. $50,000. Her mind immediately went to drugs, theft, fraud, never to scholarship, achievement, or merit. Her voice carried a particular tone, one reserved for certain customers, a tone she'd perfected without realizing it. "This amount seems unusual for someone your age." The words dripped with suspicion, disguised as concern. She held up a $100 bill from her drawer, testing it with 3 different counterfeit detection pens, while Marcus stood there, his MIT folder visible in his hands, patient despite the insult. She picked up her phone, speaking loudly enough for others to hear, partly for security and partly for performance. "I need special verification on a large withdrawal." "Yes, very unusual circumstances. The customer is..." She paused, looking at Marcus. Young. Very young. She didn't say black, but everyone understood the code. Richard Thornton emerged from his corner office, like a man defending his castle. At 52, he'd spent his entire career at First National Trust, climbing from junior teller to branch manager, by following rules and, more importantly, knowing when to bend them. His ascent had been aided by a father who'd been a branch manager before him, a network of connections from his country club, and the kind of casual confidence that came from never having his presence questioned in any room. His stern expression was perfectly calibrated, concerned enough to show he took security seriously, harsh enough to intimidate. The expression had worked on dozens of suspicious customers over the years, though suspicious had a very specific meaning in his vocabulary. "We have protocols for suspicious transactions," he announced, though Marcus hadn't done anything suspicious beyond being young and black with money. The protocols Thornton referenced were real, but their application was entirely at his discretion, and his discretion had a pronounced racial bias that he'd describe as intuition if anyone dared to question it. "Sir, I have all the documentation right here," Marcus said, spreading his papers on the counter with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd had to prove himself before. The notarized MIT Excellence Scholarship letter bore the official seal, its gold embossing catching the light. The bank statement from MIT's bursar office showed the incoming transfer, every number legitimate and verifiable. His student ID, driver's license, and even his passport lay in a neat row, a trinity of identification that would have been excessive for anyone else. Thornton barely glanced at them, his mind already made up. In his experience, which he'd tell you spanned 3 decades, young black men with large sums of money meant trouble. He'd seen enough cop shows, read enough biased news stories, absorbed enough casual racism to know that this situation required what he'd call extra vigilance. "Where did you really get this money, young man?" Thornton's emphasis on "really" carried decades of prejudice in a single word. The question implied that the documents were fake, that Marcus was lying, that there was no legitimate way for someone who looked like him to have earned this money. Meanwhile, at the adjacent VIP window, Bradley Henderson III was completing his own transaction. The 19-year-old Yale student was withdrawing $75,000, and the teller serving him smiled warmly. Bradley's confidence came from generations of wealth. His great-grandfather's portrait hanging in Yale's Sterling Library, his father's name on a dormitory. "Buying another car, Bradley?" she asked with genuine interest, as if a teenager withdrawing enough money to buy a luxury vehicle was perfectly normal. No one questioned the source of his funds. No one called for special verification. No one tested his bills with multiple pens. The contrast was so stark that even other customers began to notice, though most would dismiss it as coincidence rather than pattern. Marcus knew the Bank Secrecy Act better than most adults. He'd spent the previous summer interning at the State House, where he'd helped research financial legislation. The internship had been competitive. 500 applicants for 10 spots. But Marcus had earned his position through a combination of perfect grades, compelling essays, and a recommendation from a state senator who'd been impressed by Marcus's questions at a town hall. "Sir, I've reviewed the BSA," he said calmly, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "Transactions over 10,000 require a currency transaction report, not denial of service. The law is clear that—" "Don't tell me about banking law, boy." Thornton's use of "boy" hung in the air like a slap, a word that carried centuries of dismissal and dehumanization. Several customers flinched at the word, recognizing its weight even if Thornton would later claim he didn't mean anything by it. Tony Morrison, the security guard, approached reluctantly. At 38, Latino, with 2 kids in college, he knew this was wrong. The kid had paperwork, real paperwork, official paperwork. But Thornton's voice carried a threat that every working person recognized, the threat of unemployment in a city where rent was rising faster than wages. "Do your job or find another one," Thornton had said quietly but firmly. Morrison moved closer to Marcus, each step feeling like a betrayal of his own principles. His daughter was applying to colleges this year, had dreams of MIT herself. He whispered an apology that wouldn't pay his bills but might save a fragment of his soul. "Sorry, kid. I got bills to pay." The words were barely audible. But Marcus heard them, understood them, even in his anger, recognized the impossible position Morrison was in. The bank's history told its own story of discrimination, though it was a story written in legal settlements and quiet apologies rather than headlines. First National Trust had advertised itself as serving excellence since 1887, conveniently omitting that until 1977, they'd actively redlined black neighborhoods, refusing mortgages to qualified black applicants while approving questionable loans for white customers. The red lines on their old maps, discovered during a 2019 investigation, had literally carved Boston into worthy and unworthy, human and less than, us and them. In 2019, they'd paid a $4.5 million fine for denying loans to black applicants, though they'd admitted no wrongdoing in the settlement. The investigation had revealed emails between loan officers ranking applications by zip code, which happened to correspond perfectly with racial demographics. As of 2022, only 2% of their management was black, despite Boston's black population being 25%. Yet their lobby displayed glossy posters, declaring them a diversity and inclusion leader, complete with stock photos of smiling, professionally dressed people of every race. Thornton pulled out his phone, making a show of Googling Marcus's name. His search was performative, meant to intimidate, but also genuine in its suspicion. "Roxbury," he said, finding Marcus's neighborhood like it was evidence of a crime. A Roxbury kid with MIT money? Highly irregular. Roxbury was Boston's historically black neighborhood, and in Thornton's mind, that was all the evidence he needed. He'd never been to Roxbury, had no black friends, knew nothing about the neighborhood except what he'd absorbed from local news that covered crime, but never community. Violence, but never vitality. "I need proof of residence," Thornton demanded. Though no such requirement existed in bank policy, the demand was improvised, created in the moment, to add another barrier. "And parent authorization. You're what? 17. 17 and 11 months, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the humiliation. "I'll be 18 next month. The age of majority for banking in Massachusetts is 18, but 17-year-olds can maintain accounts with proper documentation, which I have. Call your parents," Thornton said with mock concern. "If they're available." The pause before available was deliberate, implying that Marcus's parents were likely absent, imprisoned, or otherwise failing in their duties. It was an assumption based on nothing but stereotypes, and it would prove to be the mistake that ended Thornton's career. Around them, the bank's customers formed an unwitting jury, their reactions revealing their own biases and beliefs. Mrs. Patricia Worthington, 72 years old and dripping with old Boston money, clutched her pearls in a gesture so stereotypical it would have been comedic if it weren't real. Her family's wealth came from shipping, though if you traced it back far enough, you'd find the ships carried more than just cargo. "That boy looks suspicious," she said to no one in particular, loud enough for everyone to hear, using boy in the same weighted way Thornton had. Jennifer Martinez, a 34-year-old teacher at Roxbury Prep, held up her phone, recording everything. She recognized something in this scene. Something ugly and familiar. She'd seen her own students treated this way, had fought battles with administration about disciplinary disparities, had watched bright children dimmed by constant suspicion. "This is wrong," she whispered to the person next to her, a stranger who nodded in agreement. Dr. James Mitchell, 41, chief of pediatrics at Massachusetts General, watched with growing concern. His medical training allowed him to read the stress in Marcus's body language, the controlled breathing, the clenched jaw, the careful stillness that spoke of someone trying not to escalate a situation. "Hey, that's just a kid," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to giving orders in emergency rooms. Robert Jackson, 55, a black veteran with sharp eyes that missed nothing, moved closer to the scene. He'd seen this before, in different decades, different places, but always the same story. Birmingham, in 1963, when he was a child watching his father dragged from a lunch counter. Vietnam in 1971, when he'd fought for a country that still saw him as 3/5 of a person. Los Angeles in 1992, when the verdict came down and the city burned. And now Boston in 2025. Watching history repeat itself with digital cameras instead of fire hoses. Ashley Thompson, 26, held her phone steady as she live-streamed to Instagram. An influencer with 50,000 followers, she usually posted about fashion and restaurants, but something about this scene compelled her to document it. "OMG. Drama at FNT," she narrated to her followers, not fully grasping that she was documenting something far more serious than drama. Her casual documentation would become evidence in 3 separate investigations. When Thornton called the police, he used carefully chosen words, a verbal dance he'd perfected over years. "We have a potential fraud situation. Young male, refusing to comply with verification procedures." He didn't mention race, but he didn't have to. The code was understood by anyone who'd worked in the system. Young male in a bank meant black. Refusing to comply meant asking questions. Verification procedures meant whatever Thornton decided they meant. The call to police wasn't protocol. It was punishment. Punishment for Marcus daring to know his rights, for speaking back, for existing in a space Thornton believed he didn't belong. The call took 47 seconds, and in those seconds, Thornton sealed not just Marcus's fate, but his own. Officer Derek Hayes arrived with the predetermined conclusion that a crime was in progress. 20 years on the force had taught him to see what he expected to see, and what he expected was criminality and black skin. He didn't review the documents spread on the counter, bank statements, scholarship letters, multiple forms of ID. He didn't ask Thornton for specifics about what crime had been committed. He looked at Marcus and saw what he'd been trained to see: a threat, a statistic, a problem to be solved with force. "Another one, huh?" Hayes said to Thornton. And that casual classification of Marcus as another one revealed years of similar encounters, similar assumptions, similar injustices. The phrase suggested this was routine, normal, just another day of removing black bodies from white spaces. Hayes approached Marcus directly, his hand already resting on his service weapon, a gesture meant to intimidate. "Hands where I can see them, officer. I'm just trying to withdraw money for college. I have all the documentation." I said, "Hands up." Hayes's voice boomed through the bank, causing several customers to step back. "Don't make this worse." Marcus raised his hands slowly, carefully, the way his parents had taught him during the talk, that conversation every black parent has with their children about surviving police encounters. No sudden movements. No aggressive gestures. Keep your hands visible. Survive the encounter first. Seek justice later. His parents had role-played this scenario with him, never imagining it would happen in a bank rather than a traffic stop. Hayes pulled out his handcuffs before establishing any probable cause, before reading any rights, before even pretending to investigate. The metal was cold, biting into Marcus's wrists as Hayes tightened them more than necessary. "You people always have excuses," he muttered, loud enough for his body camera to pick up. Except his body camera had mysteriously malfunctioned moments before, a malfunction that would later be investigated and found to be intentional. Officer Lisa Coleman, Hayes's rookie partner, shifted uncomfortably. At 29, black, and female, she occupied a precarious position in the department. She joined the force to make a difference, to be the change from inside. But every day tested that idealism. "Derek, maybe we should verify his documents first? The kid has paperwork. Maybe we should—" Hayes turned on her with barely concealed contempt. "Coleman, you're too soft. This is how you learn the streets. You can't be one of them and one of us." The them and us hung in the air, making clear that Hayes saw Coleman's blackness before her badge. It was a reminder that her position was conditional, that she was tolerated rather than accepted, that stepping out of line meant being cast back into them. But Coleman had already learned the streets, and she knew this wasn't about streets or crime or safety. This was about power and prejudice, about maintaining boundaries that should have fallen decades ago. She quietly activated her personal phone's recording function, tucking it into her chest pocket with the camera lens exposed. The recording would later save her career and end Hayes. Then she moved closer to Marcus. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Don't resist. I'm recording everything." Ashley Thompson's live stream exploded across social media with viral velocity. "Black teen arrested at bank. Number banking." While black became the caption that would change everything, within 3 minutes, her viewer count jumped from 500 to 5,000. The comments flooded in faster than anyone could read them. "Not again. Which bank? This is America. Where are the parents? He must have done something. ACAB. Why is this still happening?" Local news picked up the stream within minutes. Channel 7's social media manager saw the trending hashtag and immediately alerted the news director. Within 8 minutes, they had it on air as breaking news. The hashtag number, FNT Racism, began trending within 15 minutes, spreading beyond Boston to national attention. The bank's customers divided into camps like opposing armies on an ancient battlefield. Some defended the arrest with logic that required ignoring the evidence before their eyes. "He must have done something," they said, unable to imagine innocence in black skin. "The police don't just arrest people for nothing," they insisted, despite video evidence of exactly that happening. Others saw the obvious injustice and said so. This is racial profiling. The physical space of the bank became a battlefield of ideologies, with Marcus at the center, handcuffed and humiliated. Mrs. Worthington addressed the officers like they were her personal security, which in her mind, they were. "Officers, do your job. We can't have these people thinking they can just come in here." The "these people" was said with such casual racism that even some of her sympathizers cringed. Dr. Mitchell pushed forward. his white coat from his morning rounds still visible under his jacket. "Let me see his documents as a witness. I can verify their authenticity. I've seen enough medical documents to recognize official seals." "Sir, please step back," Hayes warned, his hand moving to his weapon, a gesture so extreme for the situation that several customers gasped. "You're going to shoot me for offering to help?" Dr. Mitchell asked, his voice incredulous. "I'm trying to de-escalate this situation. I said step back." Hayes's voice carried the edge of someone losing control, someone whose authority was being questioned, and who had only one way to respond. At MIT, Marcus's friends received alerts about the livestream. The MIT community was small and tight-knit, and news traveled fast through group chats and social media. Kevin Brooks immediately forwarded it to MIT's legal aid office with a message. "This is Marcus Washington. Full scholarship. They're arresting him for trying to withdraw his scholarship money." Sarah Williams called the ACLU's Boston chapter. She'd interned there the previous summer and still had direct numbers. "You need to see this live stream. A black MIT student is being arrested for banking while black. It's happening right now." David Anderson posted in the MIT Parents Facebook group, a powerful network of influential families who'd moved mountains for lesser causes. Marcus Washington, incoming freshman, is being arrested at First National Trust for trying to withdraw his scholarship money. This young man earned his place at MIT. "This is unacceptable." Professor Robinson, who'd written one of Marcus's recommendation letters, emailed MIT's president directly. His email was brief but powerful. "One of our incoming students is being arrested for withdrawing his scholarship money. MIT's response in the next hour will define who we are as an institution." The student newspaper mobilized reporters to the scene, their editor already composing an editorial that would run on the front page. "Is this the MIT we want to be?" Inside the bank, employees watched their workplace transform into a crisis zone, each responding according to their conscience and courage. Mike O'Brien, a junior teller, felt sick to his stomach. He'd processed a similar withdrawal just yesterday for a white teenager. No questions asked. No verification beyond standard protocol. "This feels wrong," he said to Barbara Knox, a senior teller who'd been there 20 years. "The manager knows best," Barbara replied. But even she sounded uncertain. She'd seen Thornton make questionable calls before, had seen certain customers treated differently, but never this blatantly. Tony Morrison texted his wife, "Might lose my job today." He was already calculating whether his conscience was worth his mortgage, whether standing up was worth standing in the unemployment line. Samuel Wright, the 65-year-old black janitor who'd cleaned this bank for 2 decades, watched from his supply closet. He'd seen this scene before, different actors but the same script. Young black men treated like criminals, in spaces where white wealth was worshipped. "Not this again, Lord," he prayed, having lived through enough history to know how these stories usually ended. Ryan Foster, the IT specialist, made a decision that could end his career. He quietly saved the security footage to multiple backup drives, ensuring that no one could claim the recordings were accidentally deleted. His fingers flew across his keyboard, creating redundant copies on cloud servers, external drives, and even emailing encrypted files to his personal account. He'd seen too many cases where crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared. Hayes pushed Marcus toward a corner of the bank, by the trash bins, as if he were refused to be discarded. The handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists, and he was forced to sit on the cold marble floor. The positioning was deliberate, next to the garbage, beneath everyone else, a visual reminder of where Hayes thought he belonged. Wealthy customers stepped around him like he was contaminated, averting their eyes from his shame. A small child, maybe 5 years old, pointed at Marcus with the innocent curiosity of someone who hadn't yet learned to look away. "Mommy, why is he arrested?" The mother pulled her child closer, her voice carrying theatrical fear. "Don't look, sweetie. He's dangerous." She said it loud enough for Marcus to hear, wanting him to know that even children were being taught to fear him. Marcus felt tears building, but refused to let them fall. He would not give them the satisfaction of breaking him. He would maintain his dignity even as they tried to strip it away. His mother had told him once, "They can take everything else, But dignity is yours to keep or give away. Never give it away. Thornton used the moment to perform his authority for the growing crowd. First, National Trust has zero tolerance for fraud, he announced loudly, as if Marcus had already been convicted. We protect our legitimate customers. He emphasized legitimate while looking directly at Marcus, making clear who he considered illegitimate. It was theater, with Thornton as director and star, Marcus as the villain, and the bank customers as an audience he was playing to. Bradley Henderson III walked past the scene, his $75,000 in a discreet banking bag. "Whoa, intense," he commented casually, like Marcus's arrest was entertainment, something to tell his friends about over drinks. The casualness of his privilege, the way he could observe black pain as spectacle, would haunt him later when he realized what he'd witnessed. Thornton immediately softened his tone with Bradley. "Nothing concerning you, Mr. Henderson. Just a security matter we're handling." The contrast in how he addressed Bradley versus Marcus was so stark that even Bradley noticed, though he wouldn't fully understand its significance until much later. The bank's climate control seemed to target Marcus's corner, blowing cold air that made him shiver in his blazer. When he asked to use the restroom, Hayes denied him. "Security risk," the officer said, though Marcus was handcuffed and surrounded by armed police. The denial of basic human needs was another form of degradation, another way to break him down. The water fountain near Marcus suddenly bore an out-of-order sign that hadn't been there an hour ago. Toni Morrison had been ordered to place it there, another small cruelty in a system built on such cruelties. Every small act was designed to break Marcus down, to make him confess to a crime he hadn't committed, to justify their treatment of him. "Your type always claims discrimination," Hayes said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Always playing the race card. Maybe if you people followed the law, we wouldn't have these problems." Officer Coleman quietly brought Marcus a paper cup of water, defying Hayes's implicit orders. It was a small act of rebellion that could cost her dearly, but she couldn't stand by and watch this torture. The water was lukewarm, from the employee break room, but to Marcus it tasted like hope. Outside, media vans gathered like storm clouds. Channel 7, Channel 9, and the Boston Globe sent their best reporters. The story was perfect for the news cycle. Clear injustice, video evidence, a sympathetic victim, and institutional failure. Parents from the Roxbury community began arriving, having heard through social media that one of their children was in trouble. They came not knowing it was Marcus specifically, but knowing that an attack on one was an attack on all. MIT students organized a protest that would arrive within the hour. They commandeered the student union, making signs, arranging transportation, mobilizing with the efficiency of future engineers and scientists. "Merit, not melanin," became their rallying cry. 3 additional police cruisers arrived as backup, though no one could explain what threat a handcuffed teenager posed that required such force. The show of force was itself the point, to intimidate not just Marcus but anyone watching who might think to challenge the system. Inside the bank, Marcus's mind shifted into a different gear. The tears dried, replaced by cold calculation. He'd studied law not as a career path but as survival training, understanding that in America, knowing the law was as important for a black man as knowing how to breathe. Now that training would be tested, under Massachusetts general laws. "Chapter 93 Ampere," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the bank with the clarity of someone who'd found their power. "Consumers have protection against unfair and deceptive practices. What you're doing is illegal." The bank fell silent. Customers stopped their conversations. Even the typing at teller windows paused. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, 15 U.S.C. 1691, prohibits discrimination in any credit transaction. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizure. You've violated federal law, state law, and constitutional protections." Hayes stared at him, confusion replacing confidence. "You some kind of lawyer?" "No, sir," Marcus replied calmly. "Just a kid who reads." "Is that illegal?" The question hung in the air, its simplicity devastating. Several customers lowered their phones, suddenly seeing the scene differently. Here was a teenager who knew more about the law than the officer arresting him. Marcus continued, each word precise and deliberate. I invoke my right to remain silent until counsel is present. Please document this interaction per protocol. I need badge numbers for the official complaint. This constitutes false imprisonment under state law, Massachusetts General Laws. Chapter 265, Section 26. Thornton's face reddened. He's recording this somehow, he said to Hayes, paranoid that his words were being preserved, not realizing that dozens of customers were recording everything. What specific law have I broken? Marcus asked. Which written bank policy prohibits scholarship withdrawals? Why wasn't Mr. Henderson questioned about his larger withdrawal? Is being black reasonable suspicion now? Each question was a legal trap, carefully constructed to create a record. Marcus knew every word was being recorded by multiple phones, that everything said would become evidence. Hayes fumbled for words. You're being disruptive. By knowing my rights. Marcus pressed. By requesting equal treatment? By asking for the legal basis of my detention? Shut up, Hayes shouted. But it was the rage of someone who'd lost control of the narrative. You didn't read me my Miranda rights. Marcus continued calmly, making anything I say inadmissible. You established no probable cause for detention. The bank's video will show I was calm throughout. Multiple witnesses can testify to discriminatory treatment. He paused, then delivered his final blow. Mr. Thornton, isn't this bank still under a DOJ consent decree from the 2019 discrimination settlement? Thornton went pale. The consent decree was supposed to be confidential, its terms sealed. How did this kid know about it? What else did he know? Robert Jackson had heard enough. The veteran stepped forward, his bearing still military straight, despite his years. I'm Robert Jackson, Colonel retired. 82nd Airborne, he announced, his voice commanding immediate respect. Every veteran in the bank turned toward him, recognizing rank even in civilian clothes. This young man showed proper documents, Jackson continued. I've been watching since he walked in. He was respectful, patient, and compliant. What I'm seeing now is harassment. Jackson paused, his eyes distant, seeing other times and places. Birmingham, 1963. I was 8 years old. Watching Bull Connor's police dogs attack children. My father told me it would get better, that his generation was fixing it. He pulled out his Purple Heart, letting it catch the light. Vietnam, 1971. I fought for this country while it still treated me as less than human. Came home to no colored signs that were illegal, but still there. His voice grew stronger. I didn't fight for this. I didn't bleed in Vietnam, so you could terrorize children in banks. I didn't lose friends in foreign sand, so you could perpetuate the same discrimination we were supposedly fighting against. Other veterans in the bank began moving toward Jackson, forming an informal unit. They recognized command authority when they saw it, and they chose their side. An elderly white veteran with a Korea veteran cap stood beside Jackson. A middle-aged woman in an army jacket joined them. A young man with an Afghanistan service pin moved closer. They didn't speak, but their presence spoke volumes. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward with his own authority. I'm Dr. James Mitchell, Chief of Pediatrics at Mass General. This stress could trigger serious health issues in a minor. Toxic stress in adolescence can cause lasting psychological and physical damage. He addressed Marcus directly, his doctor's instincts overriding the scene's tension. Young man, are you diabetic? Asthmatic? Any medical conditions? Asthmatic, sir, Marcus replied. My inhaler is in my pocket. Mitchell turned to the officers, his voice taking on the tone he used when giving life or death orders in the ER. Officers, denying access to prescribed medical devices opens you to significant liability. If he has an asthma attack, you could face criminal charges. I'm documenting this as a medical professional. You are endangering a minor with a known medical condition. Jennifer Martinez had been silent long enough. I teach at Roxbury Prep. This is my student, she announced, stepping forward despite the risk to herself. Marcus Washington has a 4.8 GPA. He's a National Merit Scholar. He tutors kids for free every Saturday at the community center. Never accepts payment. She held up her phone, showing a Boston Globe article from 3 months ago. His MIT acceptance was front-page news in the education section. Local student overcomes odds. That's him. That the kid you're treating like a criminal is one of the best students in Massachusetts. Parents in the crowd began recognizing Marcus. "That's the kid who helped my son with calculus," one mother exclaimed. "He wouldn't take payment. Said helping was its own reward. He taught my daughter coding." Another parent added. "She went from failing computer science to getting an A. He organized the neighborhood cleanup last summer," an elderly woman said. "Picked up trash for 8 hours in 90-degree heat." The Bank Employees United front began cracking. Mike O'Brien spoke up first, his conscience finally outweighing his fear. "I processed a similar amount yesterday for a white teenager. $70,000 for a car. No questions asked. No verification beyond standard protocol. The kid was actually rude, demanding faster service. We apologized to him for the wait." Ryan Foster added his voice, holding up his tablet. "I'm checking our IT records now. There are no suspicious activity flags on this account." The MIT transfer cleared all automated security checks. The system shows it as verified and legitimate. The only flag was added manually by Mr. Thornton after the customer arrived. Samuel Wright emerged from his supply closet, his dignity intact despite decades of being invisible in this space. "I've seen this boy volunteer at the food bank every Thanksgiving for 5 years. He knows my grandchildren by name, helps them with homework when he sees them. This is a good kid you're destroying." Even Barbara Knox wavered, her 20 years of loyalty to the bank crumbling against the weight of obvious injustice. "Maybe we should verify the documents properly before this goes any further. This seems wrong." Tony Morrison pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my union representative. This isn't what I signed up for. I'm a security guard, not an enforcer of discrimination." Marcus's shattered phone had been recording everything to the cloud before it broke. The MIT emails were auto-forwarding to an ACLU app he'd installed after attending a Know Your Rights workshop. His location services showed no suspicious movement patterns: home, school, community center, bank. His banking app displayed a legitimate transfer history with no irregularities. His calendar proved appointments with his MIT advisor. Even his voice memos contained recordings of previous discrimination incidents. A sad archive of a young black man's reality in America. The security footage, secretly preserved by Ryan Foster, told a different story than Thornton would later claim. It showed Marcus entering calmly, waiting patiently in line for 12 minutes, presenting documents immediately when asked. It showed Bradley Henderson actually becoming agitated when asked to wait 5 minutes, demanding immediate service and threatening to call his father. It showed Thornton gesturing to call the police before even looking at Marcus's papers. It showed Emily Patterson hitting her panic button while Marcus was still smiling and saying, "Good morning." It showed Hayes's hand on his weapon the moment he entered the bank, before even seeing Marcus. The social media investigation revealed Marcus's true character faster than any background check could. His LinkedIn showed an internship at the State House, with glowing recommendations from legislators of both parties. His Instagram featured photos of community service, reading to children at the library, serving meals at homeless shelters, cleaning parks with youth groups. His Twitter had been personally thanked by the mayor for organizing a youth coding program that reached 300 kids. His Facebook revealed his parents: Dr. Angela Washington, cardiac surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and another professional whose name wasn't immediately visible in the frenzy of searching. His TikTok had gone viral 3 months ago with a video teaching kids to code, garnering 2 million views and thousands of comments calling him the teacher we all need. Then Marcus's phone rang. The cracked screen somehow still functioned, and the caller ID was visible to everyone nearby: Dad, Egg Office. The phone had been damaged in such a way that it defaulted to speaker mode, and suddenly a deep, controlled voice filled the bank. "Marcus, your location tracker shows you at First National. Everything okay?" The entire bank fell silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Marcus's voice cracked for the first time. "Dad, I'm being arrested." The silence that followed felt like the calm before a hurricane. Then the voice returned, no longer warm but cold as judicial steel. "Put Officer Hayes on." Now, Hayes looked at the phone like it might bite him. His training hadn't prepared him for this. Coleman grabbed it and held it toward him. "Derek, you need to take this. Officer Hayes." The voice carried authority that couldn't be ignored. "This is Attorney General Isaiah Washington. You have my son in custody. Explain." Immediately. The color drained from Hayes's face so quickly that Dr. Mitchell moved closer, genuinely concerned the officer might faint. Your son? Marcus Isaiah Washington. My son. I'm 7 minutes out. Nobody moves. Nobody touches him. Evidence preservation protocols are now in effect. Am I clear?" "Yes, sir," Hayes whispered, his voice barely audible. The transformation in the bank was instant and absolute. The phone call had flipped reality like a switch. The criminal became the victim. The protectors became the perpetrators. The powerful became the powerless. Thornton was already on his phone, Googling frantically. "A.G. Washington family," he typed with shaking fingers. The images loaded like a countdown to his doom. Marcus at the State House ceremony when his father was sworn in. Marcus at the governor's mansion for a youth leadership award. Headlines: A.G. Washington's son. Accepted to MIT. First family celebrates academic excellence. Washington family donates $100,000 to Roxbury youth programs. Emily Patterson gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God. Oh my God. What have we done?" Hayes's hands shook as he fumbled for his handcuff keys. "Sir, we didn't know." "Stop," Coleman said, placing her hand on his. The AG said, "Nobody moves." "Evidence preservation. You move him now, you're tampering with a crime scene." "Crime scene?" Hayes's voice cracked. "What crime?" "False imprisonment. Civil rights violations. Conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law." Coleman's voice was steady now, seeing her path clear. "You're the suspect now, Derek." The bank transformed into a tableau of frozen panic. Customers held their phones steady, recording every second. The live streams multiplied, dozens of angles capturing the same moment of revelation. The hashtags evolved. Number AGS son. Number Marcus Washington. Number First National Scandal. The Washington family's background emerged in rapid social media searches. Isaiah Washington, first Black Attorney General of Massachusetts, former JAG officer, Harvard Law, civil rights attorney for 15 years before entering public service. His record was impeccable. Highest conviction rate in the state, known for taking on police corruption, had never lost a civil rights case. His wife, Dr. Angela Washington, cardiac surgeon, Johns Hopkins, trained, performed the first pediatric heart transplant in New England, served on the boards of 3 hospitals. They'd never used their positions to advantage Marcus. Every achievement, the grades, the MIT acceptance, the scholarships, he'd earned on his own merit. The bank hadn't recognized him because he'd insisted on using his middle name on some documents, wanting to be judged as Marcus, not as the AG's son. He'd even chosen a different last name on social media to avoid the connection. The motorcade arrived like thunder. 3 black SUVs with government plates stopped in perfect formation. State troopers emerged first, securing the perimeter with military precision. Media recognized the official vehicles immediately. These were the same SUVs that transported the Attorney General to high-profile crime scenes. Bank customers pressed against windows, phones capturing every moment. "Everyone stay calm," Thornton said, though his voice shook like autumn leaves. Hayes tried to subtly uncuff Marcus, but Coleman stopped him again. "Evidence, Derek. You tamper now. You're done. Your career. Your pension. Maybe your freedom." Isaiah Washington entered the bank with the controlled fury of a father and the calculated precision of a prosecutor. At 6'3", in an immaculate charcoal suit, he commanded the space instantly. His presence changed the very air in the room. Customers straightened, employees stepped back. Even the security cameras seemed to focus on him. Two assistants flanked him, tablets ready to document everything. 3 state troopers followed, their presence making clear this was now a state matter. The lead trooper was Captain Michelle Roberts, known for her role in taking down corrupt cops. Her presence meant this wasn't just about protecting Marcus, it was about prosecution. "Nobody touch my son," Isaiah said, his voice carrying to every corner of the bank. "This is a crime scene. Evidence will be preserved. Every document, every recording, every witness statement." He walked past Thornton without acknowledgement, the dismissal more devastating than any confrontation. Thornton reached out, as if to explain, but Isaiah moved past him like he was furniture. Isaiah knelt beside Marcus, his prosecutorial facade cracking for just a moment. The father emerged, checking his son for injuries, seeing the marks from the 2 tight handcuffs. "You okay, son?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the mixture of relief and rage. Isaiah stood, transforming back into the Attorney General. His questions were surgical strikes, each one designed to build a case. "Officer Hayes, why is my son in handcuffs?" "Sir, we received a report of suspicious activity." "From whom?" "Mr. Thornton." "Based on what specific observation?" Hayes looked at Thornton, who remained silent, his face pale. "Mr. Thornton, which written bank policy was violated?" Thornton stammered. "The amount was unusual." "Unusual? Is $50,000 above your bank's withdrawal limit?" "No, but what? Was his documentation insufficient?" "We needed additional verification." "Based on which written policy?" "Can you show me that policy? Is it applied uniformly to all customers?" Silence stretched like a taut wire. "Why wasn't my son allowed his phone call?" "That's a constitutional right, Officer Hayes." Hayes started to answer, but Isaiah cut him off. "Where's the warrant? The probable cause affidavit? The Miranda warning?" Each question landed like a hammer blow. The state troopers were already photographing everything. Marcus's position, the handcuffs, the scattered documents, the out-of-order sign on the water fountain that witnesses confirmed hadn't been there earlier. Captain Roberts spoke into her radio. "We need crime scene techs here now. Full processing. This is being treated as a federal civil rights crime scene. This is now a state investigation," Isaiah announced. "Officer Hayes, Officer Coleman, you will provide your body cameras immediately." "Mine malfunctioned," Hayes said weakly. "How convenient. And how predictable." "Officer Coleman." Coleman pulled out her phone. "I have personal recording, sir. Full interaction from the moment we arrived." Isaiah nodded at her, a small gesture that would later result in her promotion and commendation. "Captain Roberts, ensure Officer Coleman's recording is preserved. Multiple copies. Chain of custody documentation." The AG's team worked with surgical efficiency. Witness statements were collected on official tablets with legal authentication apps. Each witness had to provide identification and contact information. The bank's security footage was legally requisitioned, with Ryan Foster eagerly providing his backed-up copies. "I made multiple backups," Foster told the investigators. "I knew something like this would happen. I've seen it before. Just never this bad." Every customer's recording was cataloged with timestamps and angles noted. The scene was photographed from every angle using crime scene protocols usually reserved for homicides. As the legal implications dawned on them, the perpetrators' attitudes shifted dramatically. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't a criminal, but Mr. Washington. The water fountain miraculously worked again. Someone offered their chair. The air conditioning was adjusted. The small cruelties were reversed, but too late. Thornton attempted damage control. "Mr. Washington, young Mr. Washington, we sincerely apologize. This was all a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. We were just being cautious." "Stop talking," Isaiah said quietly. "Anything you say can and will be used against you. You might want to call a lawyer." Marcus remained silent, maintaining his dignity as his father had taught him. "Don't give them anything they can use to diminish your justified anger. Let the law speak for you." Mrs. Worthington tried to retreat into the crowd. "Well, I never said he was guilty of anything. I was just observing. Ma'am. Captain Roberts approached her. We'll need your statement. You were a witness to potential civil rights violations. Ashley Thompson's livestream had evolved into breaking news. OMG, the Attorney General is here. This is his son. Her follower count was climbing by thousands every minute. The veterans in the bank saluted Isaiah, recognizing him as a fellow serviceman. He returned the salute crisply, his JAG training still evident. Dr. Mitchell shook his head. The news never mentioned he had a son. Jennifer Martinez smiled sadly. Marcus never told anyone. He wanted to earn everything on his own. He could have coasted on his father's name, but he chose the harder path. The immediate consequences began rolling out like dominoes. Isaiah turned to Captain Roberts. Officer Hayes is suspended, immediately pending investigation. Confiscate his badge and service weapon. Hayes's hand went to his badge reflexively, as if he could protect it. You can't. I can, and I am. Massachusetts General Law Chapter 12, Section 11H, gives me authority to investigate civil rights violations. Captain Roberts, execute the suspension. Roberts stepped forward. Officer Hayes, your badge and weapon. Now, the ritual of stripping a cop of his badge was usually done privately, to preserve dignity. This was public, deliberate, a message to every officer watching. Coleman was promoted to acting senior officer on the spot, the first black woman to hold that position in the precinct. Officer Coleman, your quick thinking in preserving evidence will be noted in your file. You've shown the integrity we need. Thornton was placed on administrative leave by a frantic call from the bank CEO, who was already boarding a plane from New York. Thornton, don't say another word. Don't touch anything. Don't leave the building. Corporate legal is on the way. Emily Patterson was escorted out by security. Her banking computer access revoked remotely while she was still in the building. Her key card was deactivated, her parking pass confiscated. She was given 5 minutes to gather personal items under supervision. Tony Morrison, who had shown reluctance to participate, was not only reinstated but given whistleblower protection. His union representative arrived within minutes, ensuring his job security. Mr. Morrison, your reluctance to participate has been noted. You'll be protected under state whistleblower statutes. The Department of Justice was notified immediately. Within an hour, the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts announced a pattern or practice investigation into First National Trust. The 2019 consent decree violation proceedings would begin immediately. Federal monitors would be assigned to the bank. Criminal charges were under consideration for both Hayes and Thornton. The Civil Rights Division sent prosecutors who arrived before the media even finished setting up their cameras. The bank's corporate response was pure panic. The CEO's plane was redirected to Boston, canceling a board meeting in Los Angeles. An emergency board meeting was convened via video conference. Trading was halted on the NYSE for 17 minutes, an eternity in financial markets. The stock dropped 7% in after-hours trading, wiping out $2 billion in market value. A crisis management firm was hired before the CEO's plane even landed, their team arriving with media trainers and lawyers. Hayes faced potential criminal charges for false imprisonment, violation of civil rights under color of law, and conspiracy. His pension, accumulated over 20 years, was frozen pending investigation. Thornton faced federal charges for banking violations and civil rights violations. Emily Patterson's banking license was suspended by the State Banking Commission. Industry blacklists circulated their names within hours. The personal destruction was swift and complete. Thornton's wife, reached by reporters at their Brookline home, announced she was taking their children to her mother's house. I can't be married to someone who would do this to a child, she said to the cameras. Hayes's fellow officers, seeing which way the wind was blowing, immediately distanced themselves. Several gave statements about his past behavior that suggested a pattern of racial profiling. He used to brag about his arrest numbers in certain neighborhoods, one officer told investigators. Said he had a sense for troublemakers. Isaiah Washington held a press conference in the bank's lobby, with Marcus standing silently beside him. The contrast was powerful, the father in his perfect suit, the son still bearing the marks from the handcuffs. Isaiah's words were measured, each one chosen for maximum impact. My son earned his place at MIT, through years of dedication and excellence. He's never used my name for advantage. Today, he was treated like a criminal for trying to access money he earned through academic merit. He paused, letting the cameras focus on Marcus's wrists, where the handcuff marks were turning purple. No parent should watch their child be humiliated for existing while black. No child should have to prove their humanity to access their own money. We don't want apologies. We want systemic change. We want every person who enabled this to face consequences. We want every institution that participated to be reformed or replaced. Marcus remained silent, his dignity intact, his presence more powerful than any words. The image of him standing beside his father, handcuff marks visible, would become iconic. The media explosion was immediate and overwhelming. CNN, Mississippi, NBC, and Fox News all led with the story, for once unified in their outrage. The headline wrote itself: AG's son arrested for banking while black. The hashtag number Justice for Marcus trended globally within an hour, reaching #1 worldwide. MIT's president released a statement within 2 hours. Marcus Washington represents the best of MIT. He earned his place here through exceptional merit. We stand with him completely and will be reviewing all our relationships with First National Trust. Governor Charlie Baker called for a full investigation. What happened to Marcus Washington is unacceptable. Massachusetts will not tolerate discrimination in any form. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey issued joint statements calling for federal banking reform. This incident reveals systemic problems that require systemic solutions. Celebrity support poured in. LeBron James tweeted, "This could have been my son. Hell, this could have been me. Number Justice for Marcus." The tweet was retweeted 1 million times in 3 hours. Oprah Winfrey called the family personally, offering any support they needed. "I want to interview you when you're ready," she told Marcus. "Your story needs to be heard." Black Lives Matter announced protests at every First National Trust branch in the country. Within hours, thousands gathered at branches from Boston to Los Angeles. Banking reform advocates who had struggled for attention suddenly found themselves on every news program. "We've been warning about this for years," one advocate said on CNN. Marcus Washington's case is just the one that got caught on camera. Youth organizations nationwide rallied around Marcus as a symbol of their own experiences. "We all know a Marcus" became their rallying cry. International media picked up the story, each country filtering it through their own lens. The BBC ran it as American Banking While Black, a teen's ordeal, with analysis of American racial dynamics. Le Monde titled it Le racisme systémique dans les banques américaines, comparing it to French banking discrimination. The Guardian's headline read, "MIT students' banking nightmare exposes U.S. racial profiling." With opinion pieces about global racism, Al Jazeera provided extensive coverage under U.S. racial profiling exposed in Boston Bank, interviewing international students who'd faced similar discrimination. Even NHK in Japan covered it as part of their series on American social issues, with Japanese students at MIT providing commentary. The bank's desperate attempts at damage control began immediately. Within 3 hours, they announced a $50 million scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, though critics noted it was less than the CEO's annual bonus. They committed to mandatory bias training for all staff. Real, in-person training with testing and accountability. Not the online modules they'd used before. Diverse hiring requirements were instituted with financial penalties for non-compliance. The customer complaint system would be completely overhauled with independent oversight and a direct line to regulators. Third-party audits would occur quarterly with public reporting of all metrics. A community advisory board would be established with real power to influence policy and veto authority over certain decisions. The police department, facing its own crisis, announced immediate reforms. De-escalation training would be mandatory for all officers, with failure resulting in suspension. Body cameras could no longer be disabled for any reason, with termination as the penalty for violation. The Civilian Review Board's powers were expanded to include subpoena authority and the ability to recommend criminal charges. Partnerships with community organizations would be funded and required, with officers spending at least 10 hours per month in community engagement. Youth outreach programs received emergency funding of $5 million. At the state level, legislation was fast-tracked with unprecedented speed. Marcus's law would enhance penalties for discrimination in banking, making it a felony with mandatory minimum sentences. False detention by security or police would carry mandatory minimum sentences and personal liability. Whistleblower protections were expanded to include banking employees who reported discrimination, with rewards for successful reports. A bias incident tracking system would be publicly accessible, with real-time updates. Education funding for affected communities was increased by $30 million annually. The financial commitments extracted from First National Trust went beyond the scholarship fund. Small business loans for Roxbury increased by 300%, with preferential rates and simplified applications. Financial literacy programs were funded in every Boston public school with professional instructors. A new branch was announced for Roxbury, with a community-elected board member who would have veto power over local decisions. Living wages were instituted for all bank employees, including contractors and cleaning staff, raising the minimum to $25 per hour. Oversight mechanisms were built into every agreement with teeth. Monthly compliance reports would be published online, with raw data available for analysis. Community representatives gained permanent seats on the bank's board with full voting rights. Lending data would be transparent and searchable by zip code, race, and income level. Regular town halls became mandatory, with C-suite executives required to attend and answer unscreened questions. An independent ombudsman was appointed with the power to freeze any transaction pending discrimination review and a direct line to federal regulators. 6 months had passed since that day at First National Trust, and Marcus Washington walked across MIT's campus with the measured confidence of someone who'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. The November air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter and the weight of change. His first semester GPA remained a perfect 4.0, but the number meant less than what he'd learned about justice, power, and the price of dignity in America. His research position with the AI Ethics Lab had evolved into groundbreaking work on detecting and preventing algorithmic bias in financial systems. The paper he'd co-authored, Digital Redlining: How Algorithms Perpetuate Historical Discrimination, was already being cited by researchers worldwide. His election to student government had come with the highest vote total in MIT history, a testament not to sympathy, but to respect for his vision of an inclusive campus. Every Saturday, Marcus mentored 10 high school students from Roxbury, seeing younger versions of himself in their eager faces and careful hope. He taught them coding, but more importantly, he taught them that brilliance came in all colors, that their dreams were valid, that the system that tried to break them could be reformed by their success. The summer internship offers from tech giants felt less like recognition and more like responsibility, each company wanting to claim him as proof of their diversity, while he planned to use them to create actual change. The trauma hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into purpose. Therapy sessions twice a week with Dr. Jennifer Kim, a specialist in racial trauma, helped him process not just that day but 17 years of similar moments. She never suggested he should move on or let it go, understanding that some wounds became part of you, and the goal was integration, not erasure. The speaking invitations came daily from universities, corporations, and conferences, but he accepted only one per month, refusing to become a professional victim, refusing to let his trauma become his only story. Book publishers had offered advances that would pay for graduate school twice over, but Marcus wasn't ready to monetize his pain. Maybe someday, he told his agent, when I have more to say than just what happened to me. The documentary crew from a prestigious streaming service followed him occasionally. But he controlled the narrative, reviewing all footage, having final cut approval. His relationship with Amanda Chen, a fellow MIT student studying social justice law, remained private despite media interest. She understood him in ways that had nothing to do with that day at the bank, seeing the mathematician and the dreamer, not just the symbol. Family bonds had strengthened through struggle, welded together by shared trauma and collective triumph. Sunday dinners became sacred time. No phones, no distractions, just the three of them processing their weeks, remembering how to laugh, relearning how to exist without vigilance. Father-son camping trips to the Berkshires resumed, but now they talked about justice alongside fishing, about power alongside patience. His mother's pride was quiet but profound. She'd clip every article about him but never display them, keeping them in a box marked simply Marcus. Not my hero or my son the symbol. Just Marcus. Extended family from Atlanta, Chicago, and Oakland had called within hours of the incident, reminding him that he was part of a network that stretched across the country, that he was never alone. A new family tradition emerged. Social Justice Sundays, where they volunteered together at different organizations, his father teaching law clinics, his mother providing free medical consultations, Marcus tutoring kids in STEM. Unexpected friendships had grown from that horrible day. Relationships forged in crisis becoming bonds of choice. Officer Lisa Coleman came to Sunday dinner once a month, bringing her daughter Jasmine, who wanted to study law. "I want to be like Mr. Washington," Jasmine would say, meaning Isaiah. But Marcus saw her watching him too, understanding that courage came in many forms. Dr. Mitchell's son, Brian, joined Marcus's study group, their fathers bonding over coffee and conversations about raising conscious children in an unconscious world. Colonel Jackson met Marcus for coffee every first Tuesday at a small cafe near campus, sharing wisdom from battles both foreign and domestic. "The war never ends," he'd said once. "It just changes battlefields. But that's why we keep fighting, so maybe your kids won't have to." Jennifer Martinez recommended 3 of her best students to Marcus's mentoring program, kids who reminded him of himself. Brilliant but careful, ambitious but aware. Even Toni Morrison stayed in touch, his union now fighting for other whistleblowers, using his story as an example of why standing up mattered even when it cost you. Marcus used his platform thoughtfully, understanding that fame was temporary but change could be permanent. His high school speeches focused on knowing your rights, not on his story, teaching kids the law that could save them, not the trauma that had marked him. His single congressional testimony was precise, unemotional, and devastating in its clarity, using data and law rather than emotion to make his case. The 10 students he mentored from Roxbury received his full attention every Saturday, 4 hours that were non-negotiable, more important than any interview or appearance. His fundraising for legal aid organizations had raised $200,000, every penny going to others facing discrimination without the protection of a father in power. Roxbury itself was rising, the community using the momentum from Marcus's case to demand changes they'd sought for decades. The new community bank, Unity Trust, had opened with fanfare and substance. Its board comprised entirely of community members. Its lending practices transparent and fair. The youth center, built with settlement funds, bore no one's name but belonged to everyone. A place where kids could be safe, could learn, could dream without fear. Small business loans had increased by 300%, with default rates lower than traditional banks had claimed was possible, proving that the community had never been the risk the system had. Home ownership in the community increased by 15%, as predatory lenders were driven out by regulation and competition. College attendance rates from Roxbury Prep had doubled, with MIT admissions tripling. The Marcus effect, some called it, though he insisted it was just kids finally getting the chance they'd always deserved. First National Trust had transformed, though trust would take generations to rebuild. The new CEO, Marcus Thompson, no relation despite the name, came from the National Urban League with a mandate for change and the power to implement it. The board's 40% people of color wasn't just numbers. They had real power and used it, blocking proposals that would have maintained old patterns. The Roxbury branch had become the bank's most profitable, destroying myths about urban banking being inherently risky. Customer complaints had decreased by 80%, with resolution times cut in half. Employee satisfaction scores increased across all demographics, suggesting real culture change rather than surface compliance. The relationship between police and community had shifted measurably, though everyone knew how fragile progress could be. Hayes had resigned in disgrace, moving to Florida where his reputation hadn't followed, though the internet ensured his past would never fully disappear. Coleman now led the department's community outreach as a full lieutenant, her promotions celebrated widely, her presence changing how young black girls saw possibilities. The Youth Police Basketball League had waiting lists for both cops and kids, creating relationships that transcended roles. Complaints against officers decreased by 60%, as accountability became real rather than theoretical. Trust was slowly rebuilding. though everyone knew it could shatter again with one bad incident, one bad actor, one moment of unchecked power. The ripple effects reached every corner of America, spreading like waves from a stone dropped in still water. 23 states had passed versions of Marcus's law, with 7 more considering it, creating a patchwork of protections that advocates hoped would become federal. Banking. While black incidents decreased by 40%, as documentation increased by 200%, people were still being discriminated against. But now they had tools to fight back. Youth knowing their rights had become a movement, with TikTok videos reaching millions, teaching kids in 60 seconds what might save their lives. Corporate diversity initiatives showed measurable progress for the first time in decades. Fear of becoming the next First National Trust driving real change. The national conversation had shifted from whether discrimination existed to how to end it, a subtle but crucial evolution. Marcus stood at the podium for MIT's graduation ceremony, though he still had 3 years to go. He'd been asked to introduce the keynote speaker, but his 2 minutes had been negotiated to 5 after the administration read his speech. The auditorium was packed, overflow crowds watching on screens across campus. That day at First National Trust broke me open. Not apart, he began, his voice carrying across Killian Court through speakers that seemed inadequate for the weight of his words. There's a difference. Breaking apart leaves you in pieces, scattered, irretrievable. Breaking open lets light in and out, creates space for growth, for others to enter. He paused, looking at his parents in the front row, his mother wiping tears she didn't try to hide, his father standing straighter, prouder than any victory in court had made him. Injustice revealed becomes justice demanded, but only if we refuse to let trauma become our only story. My pain became our purpose, but purpose without action is just poetry, beautiful, but impotent. Change costs everything. Comfort, safety, the bliss of ignorance, the ease of acceptance. But silence costs more. It costs lives, dreams, and souls. It costs the future. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, starting with his mentees from Roxbury and spreading through the auditorium like fire. The keynote speaker, a former Secretary of State, later said it was the hardest act she'd ever had to follow. Isaiah Washington watched his son from the stage, thinking about his own journey from military JAG to Attorney General, from fighting for justice in courtrooms to watching his son fight for it in bank lobbies. The worst day of his life as a father had become a catalyst for change he'd been trying to create for 20 years as a lawyer. His son's dignity in that bank had saved not just Marcus, but thousands of other kids who would never face that humiliation. The system had changed because Marcus didn't break, because witnesses didn't stay silent, because technology made hiding impossible, because sometimes the universe aligned to make justice unavoidable. He was considering a run for governor, but that was tomorrow's decision. Today was about Marcus. The community elders watched from reserved seats, their weathered faces showing something new. Not just hope, but evidence of it. We've seen this before, Robert Jackson had said at the last community meeting, but this time feels different. The young people aren't just marching, they're legislating. They're not just protesting, they're building. Technology made hiding impossible. The coalition is broader than we ever achieved. Hope tastes different now, less bitter, more possible. There had been unexpected reconciliations that surprised everyone, suggesting that redemption might be possible even for those who'd done wrong. Thornton had issued a public apology that seemed genuine, taking full responsibility without using phrases like misunderstanding or miscommunication. He now worked with a nonprofit, teaching financial literacy in underserved communities, using his banking knowledge for good. Emily Patterson volunteered at the youth center every weekend, teaching kids about banking while learning about lives she'd never understood. Her transformation seemed real. Her shame transformed into service. Mrs. Worthington had donated $100,000 to Marcus's scholarship fund with a note. I was wrong. Age is no excuse for ignorance. I'm learning. Bradley Henderson III was interning at the ACLU. His privilege transformed into purpose. His casual cruelty replaced by conscious action. Healing was happening in ways no one had predicted, suggesting that change was possible even for those who'd participated in the system. Marcus returned to First National Trust exactly 1 year after his arrest. This time he entered through the executive entrance as the youngest advisory board member in the bank's history. The same marble floor that had been cold against his handcuffed body now reflected his confident stride. The transformation was complete, but continuous. Victory achieved, but vigilance maintained. The teller who greeted him smiled genuinely, not the careful smile of someone who recognized him, but the warm smile of someone who saw him as fully human. "Welcome, Mr. Washington. The board is ready for you." She was new, hired as part of the diversity initiative. But her warmth seemed authentic rather than mandated. The security guard, a young black woman named Keisha who'd been hired as part of the reforms, nodded with respect that had nothing to do with his father's position. She saw him as what he was. A young man who'd changed her possibilities, who'd made her job exist, who'd proven that fighting back was possible. The conference room waited, filled with executives who would listen to his recommendations about reaching young customers, about building trust in communities they'd betrayed, about becoming the bank they'd always claimed to be. His proposals were radical but necessary. Zero-fee accounts for students, mobile banking units for underserved communities, loan officers who looked like their customers, algorithms transparent and auditable. The Rolex clock on the wall showed 11:47 a.m. The same time. The same place. But everything had changed. Marcus smiled as he opened the conference room door, knowing that this was just one battle in a longer war, one victory in a struggle that would outlive him. But it was his battle to fight, his moment to seize, his chance to transform trauma into triumph. The future waited inside. Not perfect, not without challenges, but possible in ways it hadn't been before. Justice had a young face, brilliant and unbroken, ready to build something better than what had been torn down. The door closed behind him, but the story continued, rippling outward in waves that would touch shores he'd never see, changing lives he'd never know, creating possibilities that had been impossible just 1 year ago. Together. Finally. Home. Not an ending, but a beginning.